Time to fuel your business success. Welcome to Harmonious at Lunch. We're bringing you bite-sized advice and expert conversations to drive clarity and growth 5 days a week. Make sure you join our Facebook group at humanoff.com/lunch, where listeners like you and our guests hang out so we can find harmony in business together. If you're building a business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome back into some more bite-sized business advice. In today's episode, we have a repeat guest. At the time you're hearing this, we would have recorded or released the episode with Cheryl, her first episode about 4 weeks ago. But she's back a second time, and we already have a third one booked on the calendar. I'm so excited. Cheryl's a phenomenal guest. But today we're talking about problem solver profiles and 5 ways people make decisions, how to be more dynamic and a flexible decision maker. Sounds fascinating, and I can't wait to unpack it. So Cheryl, welcome back to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. So happy to be with you.
So we're recording this like a week apart. So I just saw you. I'm very excited to see you again. But the people in that time already love you. I told you before we started recording, the clips from that episode are blowing up on YouTube, which is so cool. We talked about the area method on that episode. Now we're talking about problem solver profiles. So why don't we just dive right in and get to it? Explain to me how they coincide with each other, what the differences are, and sort of the difference between the two.
Terrific. I'm so happy to be back with you. And since you said, as we were preparing everything, that you are using area, I hope you'll share with everybody how it's been working out for you. The relationship between the area method and the problem solver profiles is in part what I learned about decision making after I introduced the area method out into the world. What I realized is that the system works for everybody, but people use it as they are, as opposed to as it is. And that started to make me think about the fact that different people seem to gravitate and prioritize the pieces that seem the most intuitive to them. So if I was teaching in the finance department at Columbia Business School, absolute information, the first step of area where you're gathering primary source data, that's where they gravitated to, and they were super comfortable there. When I was teaching at the Graduate School of Journalism at Columbia, students really gravitated and wanted to prioritize areas exploration step, where you get beyond document-based sources, you identify good prospects and ask some great questions. It's about interviewing and actually dealing directly with people, and so on. And so what I realized is maybe there is something to examine from people that I've worked with, whether it's, people through the State Department in working with counterterrorism specialists, or students in journalism or in finance, or somebody solving a deeply personal problem, like choosing what schooling would be best for their child, to look at how people prioritize about 6 different variables: speed, whether it's good or bad, and how much they want to optimize for speed, actually collecting numbers, valuing including other stakeholders, whether or not people feel comfortable and confident about the next step that they're taking in making a decision, and so on. And by analyzing information across these 6 different variables, I realized there's sort of 5 dominant ways that people approach their decisions. And they each have beautiful strengths, but they each also come with some limitations. And what that meant is that in using a system like the area method, some steps were just more comfortable than others, and people wanted to do more of what they were already good at. But it also showed me that staying with the system and its way that it actually puts in strategic stops so that you move through an organized process ensured that we don't just do what we're good at and what we like, but we also do things that can make us more well-rounded and pressure test what we think is the right pathway forward. So the 5 profiles, I gave them fun names because we think in language, and we've never had a language around decision making. The adventurer, the detective, the listener, the thinker, and the visionary. So if you want, I can go through the 5, tell you a little bit about each, and your listeners can think about what sounds like them. And then I can give them a quiz to take that will help them to self-identify their profile.
I love it. That's super cool. And I do want to go through them. A question popped in my head though before we dive into them. So there's this school of thought about being an expert, so to speak, and basically staying in the lane of what you're really good at and filling in the gaps with other people with different skill sets for where you're not. So in this context of making decisions, you say we all gravitate towards one. It has strengths, it has weaknesses. What's your philosophy on leaning into your one and being really, really good versus being aware of the rest and trying to adapt in certain situations? Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah, it's a terrific question as usual from you. I think we do some of both, right? We tend to come in with our expertise, and that tends to give us an inclination about what we're favoring. But then with the problem solver profiles remind you is that it's really the wisdom of all the 5 different profiles that gives you that fulsome understanding
Okay.
of the way that you're approaching the decision. And that can help you say, you know what, my expertise, I do like it here, or thank goodness I thought from this different vantage point, because it updates and iterates how I think about the information that I'm dealing with.
Gotcha. Okay, beautiful. So then, yes, let's dive in. Let's unpack the 5, and then we'll talk about the quiz at the end.
Okay, terrific. So the adventurer is our most confident decision maker. She has a very strong gut, and it tends to guide her. And so she is really favoring forward momentum. What she wants is to move forward. And because she has that strong gut inclination, she can identify what her next step is, and she can take the decision. And it has, as one of its limitations, therefore, an underlying optimism bias. But I think it's very beautiful because she can not only take that next step, she knows that if it goes awry, she always has the next decision ahead. And that allows her to continually move forward, knowing that she can be agile and pivot, and again, identify a good next step should that decision start to not work out for her. Our next decision maker is the detective, and I'm a detective. We are people who we like to do research. We want to make evidence-based decisions, and to us, evidence is not from our gut, it's from getting some kind of data. What does the data say? And the reason why that also has a limitation is that because we're good at identifying data, we can really fall prey to a confirmation bias where we overweight evidence that supports a hypothesis because we can easily identify it, which is not as good as looking for disconfirming data, which shows us that even if many things can seem to confirm a hypothesis, if there's one insurmountable hurdle, it's not going to work out. The third.
So real quick, before we go to the third one, already I'm seeing a 2 that may hate each other. It's the adventurer, right? And the detective. Are they at odds usually with making decisions?
So I'm going to tell you, my colleague Emma, who's one of my all-time favorite people, she's an adventurer. So I get the pleasure every day of working with an adventurer. And while there is tension there, I think there's tremendous creative conflict that can go on where I want to slow down, but she knows what needs to happen. And by listening and working together, I can speed up a little bit. I can also lean more into the part of me that sees risk as opportunity and that doesn't always need to feel a very high level of confidence before I can take a decision. And at the same time, for her, especially when it comes to more high stakes consequential decisions, she can be reminded that she wants to gather evidence to be able to see, can it confirm her intuition and her gut, or does it maybe bump up against her inclination? And if so, that friction is a reminder that maybe she should expand what she is looking at in terms of her evidence before she moves forward.
Yeah, so
Great
we're
question.
expanding our field of vision, but even before that, just the awareness it sounds like the two of you have about each other can help reduce the friction in that process.
That's definitely true. And what I think this research does is it gives us a beautiful way to no longer denigrate somebody else's approach. Oh, they're hasty. Oh, they have analysis paralysis. Why can't they make a decision? Instead, we can see the other side of the coin. We can see the positive lens that they bring. So I can be reminded that Emma can move quickly and that Emma has a strong gut that's based on her evidence of past experience. And therefore, I think it gives you just a greater appreciation for the other decision makers in your life. Like Emma, my mother is an adventurer. It gave me an entirely different appreciation for where we had tension when I was growing up. And now, when I want her to make a big decision, and I know she's going to hate spending time investigating it, I can come better prepared. Instead of bringing her my thought process, I can bring her my recommendation. And then the adventurer is so easily able to identify that next step that she's ready to give me something to react to. And that's also very useful. So it gives you an instant way to better work and strengthen relationships while you're solving problems with other people.
Yeah,
so
I
the
love
third decision maker is our listener. She is our most collaborative, cooperative, trusting decision maker. She is able to gather the wisdom of the crowd. She generally has a strong group of advisors who she likes to go to when she's making a decision. At the same time, a limitation for our listener is the liking bias. They can overweight information that comes from somebody that they have an affinity for. And so for the listener, this is somebody who really can benefit from better building up and harnessing her own inner voice. Our thinker is our most cautious decision maker. For them, the actions between their ears. They really can explain to you why they want to make a specific decision in the way they do, because they're really able to see all the gray. They can see the different options. They can weigh it against each other. And a limitation for them would be a frame blindness or a relativity bias, where they can too narrowly circumscribe the decision as they weigh the different options. They don't color out of the lines easily. And that brings me to our fifth problem solver profile, or visionary. They are our creative, color outside the lines kind of decision maker. They're somebody who favors things that are original, and they like to be creative. And so a limitation for them can be a scarcity bias, where they want to overweight something that's original or unusual when something that's workaday would be just as good. And so you can see each of the 5 profiles, they're optimizing for different things. They value different things from their decisions. And so they see the world a little differently.
Yeah, I love this. And I want to ask a follow-up question to that. But before we do, I know you mentioned the quiz. So the quiz, is it on your website? I'll put that on the screen.
So you can go to it from areamethod.com. It's free. It'll take you about 5 minutes, or you can navigate there directly, app.areamethod.com. And you just sign up. And then after you've taken the quiz, it will share with you a little bit about the results. And then my newest book called Problem Solver will take you through how do you use these 5 profiles so that you can make better decisions with your home team and your work team.
Okay, I love it. So both of those have now been on the screen. All of the links, including Cheryl's social media, everything down below in the show notes. So make sure you go check that out and go take the quiz. It's 5 minutes. So after you identify your profile, there has to be value in understanding other people's. And we talked about that a little bit. When you're making a decision and when you have to make a decision with your team, do you focus on getting as many of the 5 as possible, depending on the size of the decision? Because I could also see where if you surround yourself with all thinkers and you're a thinker,
right?
I mean, you're missing a lot of information potentially. So how does that work in the context of making big decisions?
That's a great question too. And you bring up a really important point. When you have multiple of the same profile together, instead of strengthening each other, you tend to augment each other's limitations. When you have the different profiles, you tend to each come in with your strengths. So what I would say to that is, what I have found is that you may look like a diverse group, or you may sound like a diverse group. People from different backgrounds, maybe people speaking different languages and so on. But I've often found that organizations tend to have many people that approach decisions in the same way. So if you can find somebody who thinks differently than you do, that's going to be really useful. If your team, though, is 4 thinkers and 1 listener, for example, you still can bring in questions from each of the 5 different vantage points to help bring the intellectual differences forward. And so I encourage people to learn all 5 so that you always can bring in questions from these different vantage points.
Yeah, this may be a little controversial, but whenever we have topics like this, it always brings to mind DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I find that a lot of times DEI initiatives get people thinking the same way. And this is the complete opposite, right? We want to have a diversity of thought more than anything else in an organization, diversity of experience. When you go into organizations and you analyze them, or even if you hear back from people who are using these 5 profiles, is it hard for people to digest the fact that we want diverse thought, or is it just make common sense to them?
I think it's common sense to people, because what you tend to recognize is, if you think about the people with whom you make decisions every day, naturally some people are going to be easier for you to solve problems with than others. And diverse thought doesn't mean less conflict, right? What it does mean is that you're able to use that conflict from a creative and pro-social space, because that conflict is indicating to you that there is information between the 2 of you that is understood differently. So what it does is, instead of having to grapple with personality, which is a cocktail of things, decision making is sort of one part of personality, is that you now have a pathway to actually use the conflict to strengthen the problem solving and the relationship together. Because if you know that you're sitting across from a thinker and they want to understand the options, or if you're working with a detective and you know that she actually wants to see what data you have, you can come in ready to address those points, and to be able, therefore, to show that you are paying attention to what somebody else cares about, and they care about it because they also want to make a good decision. And to them, it includes those pieces of the puzzle that may not readily and immediately line up with your profile.
Yeah, it's so well said. I think lack of conflict to me is one of the scariest things when making a decision. If there's no conflict, we're headed down the wrong path if that happens on a regular basis. Cheryl, this is fantastic. I appreciate you coming back and going over the 5 problem solver profiles. If you had to pick, let's say someone's hearing this and they haven't heard your other episode, what's the order of operations? Do we start here and then dive into the area method, or is it the other way around?
You absolutely could start in either place. What I would say is that if you start from the problem solver profile, you immediately have information about you. If you start from the first episode, which is about area, you immediately have a system for complex problem solving. Watching both of the episodes puts it together so you understand why some parts of problem solving are easier for you than others, and you make sure not to skip the discomfort, because that's where the growth is.
I love it. So either one, but the only way I'm positive to hear what Cheryl's going to talk about next time is to subscribe. So make sure you do that. Cheryl, thanks so much for coming back and joining me.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Wherever you're watching and listening, make sure you go down below in the show notes, areamethod.com or app.areamethod.com. That'll take you right to the quiz, 5 minutes, and subscribe. We want to see you back on tomorrow's episode of Harmonious at Lunch.
Another episode of Harmonious at Lunch in the books. I hope this episode made you think and you grabbed some actionable ideas to propel your business. Don't forget to like, comment your takeaways, and subscribe wherever you're listening so we can help more entrepreneurs just like you achieve harmony in their life and business. For cutting